You're a thief, Rosa. Get out before I call the sheriff. Those words shattered 10 years of loyalty in a single breath. Falsely accused, penniless, and cast into the merciless desert, Rosa Calderon had nothing left, until a wagon carrying a widowed rancher and 5 motherless daughters appeared like an answer to her whispered prayer. "Come with us," the smallest girl said, her hand reaching out. "The house is too quiet." Rosa didn't know it yet, but saying yes would change everything. "Stay with me until the end of this story, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey has traveled." The sun hung overhead like a vengeful eye, unblinking and cruel. Rosa Calderon's shadow had shrunk to nothing beneath her feet, swallowed by the white-hot glare of midday. Her shoes, once sturdy, now split at the seams, scraped against the dirt road with each dragging step. The suitcase in her hand felt heavier with every mile, though it held almost nothing. 2 dresses, a photograph of her mother, a rosary with a broken clasp, and the last shreds of her dignity. She stopped walking, not because she wanted to, but because her body demanded it. Rosa set the suitcase down and pressed a hand to her side, wincing at the sharp stitch beneath her ribs. Her breath came in shallow gasps. The road stretched endlessly in both directions. No trees, no shade, no mercy. Just dust and heat and the distant shimmer of mirages that promised water but delivered only disappointment. She closed her eyes and let herself sink to her knees. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, I just need help, just once." It wasn't the first prayer she'd spoken that day, but it was the first one that felt like surrender. 10 years. 10 years she had given to the Ashford family. 10 years of waking before dawn to prepare breakfast, of scrubbing floors until her knuckles bled, of raising their children while they traveled to Paris and New York and places Rosa would never see. She had been invisible in that house, useful, reliable, and utterly disposable. And then came the accusation. Mrs. Ashford's emerald necklace had gone missing. Rosa had been in the parlor that morning, dusting the mantel. That was enough. No investigation, no questions, just cold, sharp certainty in Mrs. Ashford's eyes. "You're a thief, Rosa." Rosa had tried to defend herself. She'd begged them to search her room, her belongings. She'd wept and pleaded and sworn on her mother's grave. But Mr. Ashford had already made up his mind. "We trusted you," he'd said, his voice flat and final. "And you repaid us with betrayal. Get out, now, before I involve the law." So she'd left. No references. No final wages. Just the clothes on her back and a suitcase she'd packed with trembling hands while the housekeeper watched in silence, too afraid to say goodbye. Now, kneeling in the dust, Rosa felt the full weight of that moment crash down on her again. She wasn't just tired, she was broken. The sound of hooves jolted her back to the present. Rosa's eyes snapped open. She turned her head, squinting against the glare, and saw a wagon approaching from the west. At first she thought it was another mirage, her mind playing tricks on her desperate heart. But the sound grew louder, more distinct. The creak of wooden wheels, the steady rhythm of hoofbeats, real. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. She managed to get to her feet just as the wagon slowed to a stop a few yards away. The driver was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a weathered face that spoke of too many years under the sun. His hat cast a shadow over his eyes, but Rosa could feel his gaze on her, assessing. Behind him, 5 small faces peered over the side of the wagon, wide-eyed and curious. "You all right, ma'am?" the man asked. His voice was low and careful, as if he were speaking to a spooked animal. Rosa swallowed hard. Her throat felt like sandpaper. I'm fine." "You don't look fine." She wanted to argue, but the truth was undeniable. She was standing in the middle of nowhere, drenched in sweat, swaying on her feet like a drunk. Fine was the last thing she was. "I just need to keep moving," she said, bending to pick up her suitcase. The world tilted. She caught herself on her knees again, cursing under her breath. "Papa, she's going to fall," one of the girls whispered urgently. The man climbed down from the wagon with surprising ease for someone his size. He approached slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. "When's the last time you ate something?" Rosa hesitated. "Yesterday morning? The day before?" Time had blurred into a haze of heat and hunger. "I'm fine," she said again, though her voice wavered. "Ma'am, With all respect, you're not. He crouched down so they were eye level. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair. He looked tired, sad even, but his expression was kind. Where are you headed? Anywhere. The word slipped out before she could stop it. He nodded slowly, as if that answer made perfect sense. Town's about 12 miles east. You won't make it in this heat, not without water. Rosa's chest tightened. She knew he was right, but admitting it felt like admitting defeat. Here. He pulled a canteen from his belt and held it out. She stared at it, pride and desperation waging war inside her. Desperation won. She took the canteen and drank deeply, the water cool and clean and almost painfully good. When she finally lowered it, she realized she was shaking. Thank you, she managed. Don't mention it. He stood and glanced back at the wagon, where the 5 girls were still watching intently. We're headed back to our ranch. It's not far. You're welcome to ride with us. Get some food in you. Rest a bit before you keep moving. Rosa looked up at him, searching his face for some hidden motive, some trap, but all she saw was weariness and something else, something that looked almost like recognition, as if he understood what it meant to be stranded. I don't want to be a burden, she said quietly. You're not. Papa? One of the younger girls leaned over the side of the wagon, her blonde curls bouncing. Can she sit with me? The man's expression softened. If she wants to, Lily. Rosa's eyes stung. She blamed the sun. All right, she whispered, just for a little while. The man offered his hand. After a moment, Rosa took it. His grip was firm but gentle as he helped her to her feet. He picked up her suitcase as if it weighed nothing and carried it to the back of the wagon. The girls shifted to make room as Rosa climbed in, their eyes wide and curious. There were 5 of them, ranging from maybe 5 years old to mid-teens. They all had the same dark hair and serious eyes, though the youngest, Lily, was smiling. Sit here, Lily said, patting the space beside her. Rosa lowered herself onto the worn wooden bench, her body trembling with exhaustion and relief. The man climbed back into the driver's seat and flicked the reins. The wagon lurched forward, and Rosa closed her eyes, letting the gentle rocking motion soothe her frayed nerves. What's your name? Lily asked after a few minutes. Rosa. That's pretty. I'm Lily. That's Iris, Violet, Daisy, and Elena. She pointed to each of her sisters in turn. The oldest, Elena, sat in the corner with her arms crossed, watching Rosa with a guarded expression. It's nice to meet you, Rosa said, though she wasn't sure Elena felt the same. Where are you going? Lily continued, undeterred by her sister's silence. I don't know yet. Why not? Lily, that's enough, the man said from the front without turning around. Lily pouted, but fell silent. The ranch appeared after about 20 minutes, a sprawling, sun-bleached collection of buildings surrounded by scrubland and low hills. The house itself was large, but clearly neglected, with peeling paint and sagging shutters. A barn stood off to one side, its roof patched with mismatched boards. Chickens wandered freely in the yard, pecking at the dirt. The man pulled the wagon to a stop near the front porch and climbed down. Girls, help your sister with the groceries. I'll show Miss Rosa inside. The girls scattered immediately, some heading toward the house, others toward the barn. Only Elena lingered, her gaze still fixed on Rosa. Come on, the man said, offering his hand again. Rosa took it and climbed down carefully. Her legs felt like jelly. I'm Calder, by the way, he said as he led her toward the house. Calder Reyes. Rosa Calderon. Welcome to the Reyes Ranch, Miss Calderon. It's not much, but it's home. The inside of the house was dim and cool, a blessed relief after the scorching heat outside. Rosa's eyes adjusted slowly. The furniture was old but sturdy, covered in a thin layer of dust. Dishes were piled in the sink. A basket of unfolded laundry sat abandoned on the couch. I know it's a mess, Calder said, sounding almost apologetic. We've been managing. It's fine, Rosa said quickly. He gestured toward the kitchen table. Sit. I'll get you something to eat. Rosa sank into a chair, her body sagging with relief. She watched as Calder moved around the kitchen with surprising efficiency, pulling out bread, cheese, and leftover chicken. He set a plate in front of her along with a glass of cold water. Eat, he said simply. Rosa didn't need to be told twice. She ate slowly at first, then faster as her hunger roared to life. The food was simple but good, and she finished every bite. Calder sat across from her, watching quietly. "When's the last time you had a real meal?" "A few days," Rosa admitted. He nodded, his jaw tightening. "What happened?" The question was gentle, but it still hit like a punch. Rosa set down her fork, her hands trembling. "I was accused of something I didn't do. My employers, they didn't believe me. They let me go." "Let you go or threw you out?" Rosa's throat tightened. "Threw me out?" Calder's expression darkened. "That's a hell of a thing to do to someone." "They didn't care," her voice cracked. 10 years I worked for them. 10 years, and it didn't matter." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Calder leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "I don't know what you did or didn't do, Miss Calderon, but I know what it's like to be kicked when you're already down. And I know what it's like to need help and not have anywhere to turn." Rosa looked up, meeting his eyes. "So here's what I'm thinking," he continued. "You need a place to stay, and I need help around here. The girls do what they can, but this house is falling apart. The garden's overrun. I'm drowning in laundry and dishes and 100 other things I don't have time for." "You're offering me a job?" Rosa's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm offering you honest work and a roof over your head. Meals, a bed, fair wages when I can afford them." He paused. "It's not charity. You'd be earning your keep." Rosa stared at him, her mind reeling. "Why?" "Because you need it, and because we need you." He glanced toward the doorway, where Lily was peeking in, half hidden behind the frame. "This house hasn't felt like a home in a long time. Maybe you can help change that." Rosa's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. "I don't know if I can." "You don't have to decide right now," Calder said. "Stay the night. Rest. See how you feel in the morning." Before Rosa could respond, Lily stepped fully into the room. She walked over to Rosa's chair and gently took her hand. "Please stay," Lily said softly. "The house is too quiet." Rosa looked down at the small hand in hers, so trusting, so hopeful, and felt something crack open inside her chest. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay, just for tonight." But even as she said it, she wondered if one night would be enough. Calder showed Rosa to a small room at the back of the house. It was plain but clean, with a narrow bed, a wooden dresser, and a window that looked out over the hills. The evening light slanted through the glass, painting everything gold. "It's not much," Calder said, setting her suitcase on the bed. "It's perfect," Rosa said, and she meant it. He nodded and started to leave, then paused in the doorway. "Miss Calderon?" "Yes?" "Thank you for staying." Before she could respond, he was gone. Rosa sat on the edge of the bed and let out a long, shaky breath. For the first time in days, she felt safe. For the first time in years, she felt seen. Outside, she could hear the girls laughing as they chased the chickens. The sound drifted through the open window, warm and alive. Rosa closed her eyes and whispered another prayer, this time one of gratitude. Maybe, just maybe, she thought, this was where she was supposed to be all along. Rosa woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and sunlight streaming through the thin curtains. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory flooded back. The desert road, the wagon, Calder's quiet offer, Lily's small hand in hers. She sat up slowly, her body aching from yesterday's ordeal, and looked around the simple room that had been given to her. It was the first time in 10 years she'd slept in a room alone. At the Ashford house, she'd shared a cramped attic space with 2 other servants, their breathing and snoring a constant backdrop to her restless nights. Here, the silence had been almost unsettling at first. But somewhere in the dark hours, exhaustion had won, and she'd slept more deeply than she had in months. Rosa dressed quickly in one of her 2 dresses, the better one, though it was worn at the elbows and faded from too many washings. She braided her hair, pinned it up, and stepped out into the hallway. The house was already awake. She could hear movement in the kitchen, the clatter of dishes, voices murmuring. Rosa followed the sounds and found Calder standing at the stove, flipping eggs in a cast-iron skillet while Lily set the table with mismatched plates. The other girls were scattered around the room in various states of morning readiness. Iris braiding Violet's hair, Daisy reading a book in the corner, Elena leaning against the doorframe with her arms crossed, watching everything with that same guarded expression from yesterday. "Good morning," Rosa said quietly. Calder turned, spatula in hand. "Morning. You sleep all right?" "Better than I have in a long time." "Good." He gestured toward the table. "Sit. Breakfast is almost ready." "I can help," Rosa said automatically. "You're a guest," Calder replied. "Today, at least." But Rosa was already moving toward the counter, taking in the chaos of the kitchen with practiced eyes. Dishes from last night's dinner were still piled in the sink. The floor needed sweeping. The tablecloth was stained with what looked like spilled jam. She saw all of it in an instant, not with judgment, but with the quiet assessment of someone who'd spent her whole life making order from disorder. "Please," she said, meeting Calder's eyes, "let me help. I need to earn my keep." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, there's coffee in the pot if you want some first." Rosa poured herself a cup and took a grateful sip. It was strong and bitter, the way working people made it. Then she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. She moved through the kitchen with quiet efficiency, washing dishes, wiping down counters, sweeping the floor while Calder finished cooking. The girls watched her with curious eyes, whispering to each other when they thought she couldn't hear. Only Elena remained aloof, her expression unreadable. When breakfast was ready, they all sat down together, Calder at the head of the table, the girls crowded around, and Rosa at the far end, still not quite sure where she fit. The food was simple: eggs, toast, bacon that was slightly burned, but it was hot and filling, and Rosa was grateful. "Papa makes breakfast every morning," Lily announced proudly. "He's getting better at it." "It's good," Rosa said sincerely. Calder snorted. "It's edible. There's a difference." "Mama used to make pancakes," Violet said quietly. She was about 8, Rosa guessed, with serious dark eyes. "With blueberries." The table went silent. Rosa saw the way Calder's jaw tightened, the way Iris reached over to squeeze Violet's hand. Even Lily's bright smile dimmed. "I'm sure they were wonderful," Rosa said gently. "They were," Elena said from across the table. Her voice was flat, but her eyes were sharp when they met Rosa's. Everything she made was wonderful. Everything she did was wonderful. The challenge in those words was unmistakable. Rosa held the girl's gaze and nodded slowly. "Then you were very lucky to have her." Elena's expression flickered with something, surprise maybe, or confusion, but she looked away without responding. After breakfast, Calder pushed back from the table. "Girls, chores. You know the routine." He looked at Rosa. "Can I talk to you outside for a minute?" They stepped out onto the porch, where the morning sun was already heating up the day. In the distance, Rosa could see the barn, the chicken coop, and beyond that, the skeletal remains of what might have once been a garden. "I meant what I said yesterday," Calder began, leaning against the porch rail. "About the job. But I need to be straight with you about what you'd be walking into." "I'm listening." He gestured toward the house behind them. "My wife died 18 months ago. Cancer. It was fast. 6 weeks from diagnosis to the end. The girls and I, we've been trying to hold things together since then, but..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "We're barely managing. The house is falling apart. The girls need more than I can give them, and I'm drowning trying to keep the ranch running while being both parents at once." Rosa heard the exhaustion in his voice, saw it in the lines around his eyes. "What happened to the garden?" "Grace planted it. After she died, none of us had the heart to maintain it. Now it's overrun with weeds." He looked out at the brown, tangled mess. "Seems like everything she touched is dying without her." "That's not true," Rosa said quietly. Calder turned to look at her. "Your daughters are still here, still growing. That's her legacy, isn't it?" Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a crack in the armor he'd built around his grief. "I suppose it is." "What exactly would you need from me?" Rosa asked. "If I stayed." "Everything," he said bluntly. "Cooking, cleaning, laundry, mending. Help with the girls, getting them ready for school, making sure they eat, keeping them out of trouble. The garden, if you're willing, whatever needs doing." He paused. "I can't pay much. $30 a month, plus room and board. More when I can afford it. $30. It wasn't much. But it was honest work, and Rosa had learned the hard way that honest work was harder to find than she'd ever imagined. "What about your daughters?" she asked. "How do they feel about a stranger moving in?" "Lily's already attached to you. The middle ones, Iris, Violet, Daisy, they'll come around. They're good girls, just hurting." He hesitated. "Elena's the one you'll have trouble with." She loved her mother. They all did. But Elena remembers more. She was 12 when Grace died, old enough to understand what we lost. Calder's voice roughened. "She's angry. At me, at God, at the world. Some days I don't know how to reach her anymore." Rosa thought about the girl's sharp eyes, the way she'd spoken about her mother's pancakes like a weapon. "She's afraid I'm trying to replace her." "Are you?" "No one can replace a mother," Rosa said firmly. "I wouldn't try, but maybe I can help fill the space she left behind." Calder studied her for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. "If you're willing to try, we'd be grateful to have you." Rosa looked at his hand, calloused, scarred, honest, and thought about everything that had led her to this moment. The accusation, the betrayal, the empty road, the prayer she'd whispered in desperation. Maybe this was the answer. She took his hand and shook it. "I'll stay." The relief in Calder's face was almost painful to witness. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Rosa said with a small smile. "You haven't seen me work." Over the next few days, Rosa threw herself into transforming the house. She started with the kitchen, scrubbing every surface until it gleamed. She organized the pantry, mended torn curtains, beat the dust out of rugs that probably hadn't been cleaned in over a year. She worked from dawn until well past dark, driven by a need to prove her worth, to justify the trust Calder had placed in her. The girls watched her with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Lily followed her everywhere, chattering constantly, offering to help with tasks she was too small to manage. The middle girls, Iris, Violet, and Daisy, were quieter but warming up gradually. They'd peek around corners to watch Rosa work, ask shy questions about where she came from, bring her wildflowers they'd picked. Elena kept her distance. On the fourth morning, Rosa woke early and decided to tackle the garden. She'd been eyeing it all week, that tangled graveyard of what had once been something beautiful. She found an old pair of gloves in the barn, along with some rusted tools, and set to work pulling weeds. The sun climbed higher. Sweat soaked through her dress. Her back ached, her hands blistered even through the gloves. But Rosa kept working, methodical and determined. There was something satisfying about it, about imposing order on chaos, about uncovering the good bones of something that had been neglected. "What are you doing?" Rosa looked up to find Elena standing at the edge of the garden, her arms crossed, her expression hostile. "Clearing the weeds," Rosa said simply. "That was my mother's garden." "I know." "Then why are you touching it?" Rosa sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Because gardens need tending, because beautiful things shouldn't be left to die." "It's already dead," Elena said flatly. "Everything she planted is gone." "Not everything." Rosa gestured to a cluster of small green shoots poking up through the dirt. "Look, lavender, and there, that's rosemary. And I think those might be tomatoes that reseeded themselves." Elena stepped closer, squinting at the plants Rosa had uncovered. "I didn't know those were still there." "They were just buried," Rosa said, waiting for someone to find them again. The girl was quiet for a long moment, then, "She used to make lavender lemonade in the summer. She'd cut the flowers and steep them in the pitcher." "That sounds lovely." It was. Elena's voice cracked slightly. Everything about her was lovely. Rosa set down her trowel and looked up at the girl, this angry, grieving child trying so hard to be strong. "Elena, I'm not here to take your mother's place. I couldn't if I tried." "Then why are you here?" "Because your father needed help. Because I needed a home. Because sometimes people find each other at exactly the right moment." Rosa pulled off her gloves. "I lost my mother when I was 15. I know what it feels like, that hollow place inside that never quite fills up again." Elena's eyes widened slightly. "What happened to her?" "Fever. She was gone in 3 days." Rosa's throat tightened at the memory. "For years I was angry. Angry at God for taking her. Angry at myself for not being able to save her. Angry at the world for just continuing on like nothing had happened." "I'm angry too," Elena whispered. I know, and that's all right. Your anger is just love with nowhere to go. Rosa stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. But your mother wouldn't want this garden to die. She wouldn't want your home to fall apart, and she wouldn't want you carrying so much weight on your shoulders. How do you know what she'd want? Elena challenged, but there was less fire in it now. Because I was a mother once too, Rosa said quietly. Elena stared at her. You have children? I had a daughter. She was 6 when she died. Same fever that took my mother. Rosa's voice was steady, but the old pain thrummed beneath it. That was a long time ago. But I never stopped being her mother. Just like your mother never stopped being yours. For the first time, Elena's defensive mask cracked, her eyes filled with tears. I don't want to forget her. You won't, Rosa promised. And I won't let you. If you want to talk about her, I'll listen. If you want to tell me about her lavender lemonade or her blueberry pancakes or anything else, I want to hear it. Because she was important. She mattered. And so do you. Elena's lip trembled. Then slowly, she knelt down in the dirt beside Rosa. Can I help? Rosa handed her the extra pair of gloves. I'd like that. They worked side by side as the sun climbed higher, pulling weeds and uncovering the bones of Grace Reyes's garden. Elena talked haltingly at first, then more freely, about her mother's laugh, about the songs she used to sing, about the way she'd tuck the girls in at night and tell them stories about brave princesses and kind dragons. Rosa listened to every word, filing away each detail like a precious stone. This was how she could help, not by replacing what they'd lost, but by honoring it, by keeping Grace alive in the stories her daughters told. When Calder came looking for them at noon, he found them both covered in dirt, laughing at something Elena had said. He stopped short, surprise flickering across his face. Papa, Elena called. Look, Rosa found Mama's lavender. Calder walked over slowly, as if afraid sudden movement might shatter the moment. He looked down at the cleared sections of garden, at his daughter's dirty, happy face, at Rosa kneeling in the dirt with soil under her fingernails. You've been busy, he said, his voice rough. It's good soil, Rosa replied. Everything just needed a little attention. His eyes met hers, and Rosa saw understanding pass between them. They weren't just talking about the garden anymore. Come inside and eat, he said finally. Both of you, lunch is ready. Did you cook? Elena asked suspiciously. Don't push your luck, it's sandwiches. Elena laughed, actually laughed, and Rosa felt something warm bloom in her chest. Progress. Small, fragile, but real. Over the following weeks, a rhythm established itself. Rosa woke before dawn to start breakfast. She packed lunches for the girls, sent them off to school with clean faces and combed hair. She tackled the endless laundry, scrubbed floors, mended clothes worn thin at the knees and elbows. In the afternoons, she worked in the garden, slowly bringing it back to life. The girls began to lean on her in small ways. Violet brought her homework questions. Daisy asked her to braid her hair in the style the other girls at school wore. Iris shyly requested that Rosa teach her to make biscuits the way her grandmother used to. Even Elena, though still guarded, had stopped treating Rosa like an intruder. And Lily, sweet sunshine Lily, appointed herself as Rosa's shadow and assistant in everything. Rosa, do you know how to make cookies? Rosa, can you tell me a story? Rosa, Papa smiles more when you're here. That last comment, offered casually one evening while they washed dishes together, made Rosa's hand still in the soapy water. Does he? She asked carefully. Uh-huh. He's still sad sometimes, but not as sad as before. Lily handed her another plate to rinse. I think he likes you. Rosa's cheeks warmed. I think your papa is just relieved to have help around the house. Maybe, Lily said, but she grinned like she knew a secret. The truth was, Rosa had noticed changes in Calder too. He seemed less exhausted, less hollowed out by grief and responsibility. He'd started joining them for dinner instead of eating alone in his study. He asked about her day, about what the girls had done. Actually listened to the answers. Sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, she'd catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. One evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Rosa sat on the front porch with a basket of mending. The night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like spilled salt. She was so absorbed in patching one of Violet's dresses that she didn't hear Calder approach until he spoke. "You're always working." Rosa looked up to find him leaning against the porch rail, silhouetted against the darkness. "There's always work to do. You could rest sometimes." "So could you," she countered gently. He huffed a quiet laugh. "Fair point." He was silent for a moment, then added, "Elena told me what you said about your daughter." Rosa's hand stilled on the fabric. "I don't talk about her often." "I'm glad you told Elena. It helped her." Knowing she wasn't alone in her grief, he moved to sit on the steps near Rosa's chair. "What was her name, if you don't mind me asking?" "Lucia." The name felt strange on her tongue after so many years. She loved to sing. Terrible voice, but she didn't care. She'd make up songs about everything: the chickens, the weather, the bread rising in the oven. "She sounds wonderful." "She was." Rosa smiled despite the ache. "She would have liked your girls." "They like you," Calder said. "All of them, even Elena. That's not easy to earn." "They're good girls. They just needed someone to see them." "They needed someone to care." He turned to look at her fully. "Grace would have liked you too, I think." Rosa's breath caught. "You don't have to." "I'm not just saying it." His voice was quiet but firm. "Grace was practical. She would have appreciated how you just rolled up your sleeves and got to work, how you didn't try to force anything with the girls, how you respected her memory instead of trying to erase it." He paused. "This house feels like a home again. That's because of you." "I'm just doing my job." "It's more than that. You know it is." The weight of his words hung between them. Rosa didn't know what to say, how to respond to this man who'd shown her kindness when she had nothing, who trusted her with his children, who was looking at her now like she was something precious. "Calder," she began, but he stood abruptly. "I should let you finish your mending. Just wanted you to know you're appreciated here. That's all." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "Good night, Rosa." "Good night." He disappeared inside, and Rosa sat in the darkness, her heart beating faster than it should. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling foolish and flustered and something else she didn't want to name. This was a job, a place to stay, nothing more. But when she finally went inside and past Calder's study, she saw him sitting at his desk, staring at a photograph of a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Grace, his wife, the mother of his children. Rosa went to her room and closed the door, reminding herself firmly that there was no space for her in that picture. She was the housekeeper, the help, someone passing through who'd made herself useful. But in the quiet of the night, she couldn't help remembering the warmth in Calder's voice, the way he'd said her name, the look in his eyes that suggested maybe, just maybe, he saw her as more than just someone who did the laundry. She fell asleep telling herself she was imagining things. The next morning, Rosa was hanging laundry when a rider approached the house. She paused, shading her eyes against the sun, and watched a well-dressed man on a fine horse trot up to the gate. He dismounted with practiced ease and looked around the property with an expression that made Rosa's instincts prickle with warning. Calder emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his pants. "Dalton, didn't expect to see you today." "Reyes." The man, Dalton, didn't smile. "Thought I'd stop by and see how you're managing." "Managing just fine." "That's so?" Dalton's eyes swept over the property, lingering on Rosa. "Got yourself hired help now?" Rosa stiffened at the way he said it, not curious but dismissive, calculating. "Miss Calderon has been a great help to my family," Calder said evenly. "Not that it's your business." "Everything involving your ranch is my business, Reyes. You still owe me for those cattle you bought last year." "I'm making payments. You'll get your money." "Will I?" Dalton stepped closer. "Because from where I stand, you're barely keeping your head above water. Maybe it's time to consider my offer." "We've been over this. The ranch isn't for sale." "Everything's for sale at the right price." Dalton's smile was cold. "You're one bad season away from losing this place anyway. Might as well get something for it while you can." Rosa saw the way Calder's jaw clenched, the tension in his shoulders. She set down her laundry basket and moved closer, not quite sure what she intended to do, but unwilling to just stand aside. "The man said no," she said clearly. Dalton turned to look at her, his expression shifting from calculation to disdain. The hired help speaks. The hired help has ears, Rosa replied coolly, and she heard Mr. Reyes tell you to leave. That's not exactly what I said, Calder muttered, but there was something almost like amusement in his voice. Well, it's what you meant. Rosa crossed her arms. This family isn't interested in your offer, Mr. Dalton. Good day. Dalton's face reddened. You've got some nerve. She's right, Calder interrupted, stepping between them. The ranch isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. And I'll thank you to show respect to the people on my property. For a tense moment, Dalton stared at him. Then he laughed, sharp and humorless. You always were too proud for your own good, Reyes. Mark my words, you'll regret not taking my offer. He swung back onto his horse. And you, he pointed at Rosa, better hope you're around when this place comes crashing down. Though from the look of you, you're used to picking through ruins. He rode off before either of them could respond, leaving dust and tension in his wake. Calder let out a long breath. You shouldn't have done that. Done what? Antagonized him. Dalton's not a man you want as an enemy. He was already your enemy, Rosa said. I just made him aware I noticed. Calder turned to look at her, and Rosa saw something shift in his expression. Surprise giving way to respect, respect giving way to something warmer. Thank you. For what? For standing up for us. You didn't have to do that. Yes, Rosa said simply, I did. Because somewhere in the past few weeks, without quite meaning to, she'd started thinking of this place as more than just a job. These people as more than just employers. She'd started thinking of them as something that felt dangerously close to family. And Rosa had learned long ago that family was worth fighting for, even when you were afraid of losing it. Especially then. The sky had been threatening all afternoon. Dark clouds gathered on the western horizon, heavy and bruised, rolling toward the valley like a slow avalanche. Rosa watched them from the kitchen window as she kneaded dough for tomorrow's bread, her hands working the rhythm she'd learned as a girl. The air felt thick, charged with electricity that made the hair on her arms stand up. Storm's coming, Calder said from behind her. Rosa turned to find him standing in the doorway, hat in hand, his expression troubled. How bad? Bad enough. Weather like this, it could blow over, or it could tear the valley apart. He moved to the window beside her, studying the approaching clouds. I need to secure the barn, check the fences, get the horses inside. If it hits hard... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. What can I do? Rosa asked. Keep the girls inside. Make sure the shutters are latched. Fill whatever containers we have with water, in case the well gets contaminated. He met her eyes. And don't go outside once it starts, no matter what you hear. Calder, promise me. His voice was urgent. Grace went out in a storm once to save a foal. Lightning struck a tree not 10 feet from where she was standing. She was lucky to walk away. His jaw tightened. I can't lose anyone else to this valley's temper. Rosa saw the fear beneath his words, the memory of how close he'd come to losing his wife before cancer took her anyway. I promise. He nodded and settled his hat back on his head. I'll be in the barn. If I'm not back by the time it hits, don't wait up. Be careful. Always am. He paused at the door. Rosa, thank you. For everything. Then he was gone, striding across the yard toward the barn with that purposeful gait she'd come to recognize. Rosa watched him go, then turned back to her bread dough, trying to ignore the unease coiling in her stomach. The girls felt it too. They were restless all through dinner, jumping at every gust of wind that rattled the windows. Lily kept asking when Papa would be back. Elena sat silent and tense, her eyes darting toward the door every few minutes. Even Violet, usually so absorbed in her books, couldn't focus on the pages. Tell us a story, Daisy said suddenly. Please, Rosa. Something happy. Rosa looked around at their worried faces and made a decision. All right, but first we're going to make sure this house is ready for the storm. Then we'll have story time. She put them to work checking shutters, filling pots and buckets with water, gathering candles and matches in case they lost the lamps. It gave them something to do with their nervous energy, a sense of control over the uncontrollable. By the time they finished, the first drops of rain were pattering against the roof. "Now," Rosa said, settling into the rocking chair by the fireplace. "Who wants to hear about the girl who befriended the wind?" "Me." "Whoa." Lily scrambled into her lap. The others gathered close, and Rosa began the story her mother had told her long ago, about a girl who was kind to a beggar during a storm and discovered he was actually the wind in disguise. The wind rewarded her kindness by protecting her village from disasters and bringing rain to their crops when they needed it most. She was just reaching the part where the girl learned to call the wind by his true name when the storm truly arrived. It didn't come gradually. One moment there was rain and distant thunder, and the next the world exploded with sound and fury. Wind screamed around the house like a living thing, battering at the walls with fists of air. Rain hammered the roof in sheets. Lightning cracked so bright it turned the windows white, and thunder shook the floorboards beneath their feet. Violet screamed. Iris grabbed her hand. Lily buried her face in Rosa's shoulder. "It's all right," Rosa said, though her own heart was racing. She raised her voice to be heard over the storm. "The house is strong. We're safe here." "Where's Papa?" Elena demanded, her face pale in the lamplight. "In the barn. He'll stay there until it's safe to come back." "What if he's hurt? What if something happens?" "Your father knows this land. He knows how to handle storms." Rosa tried to sound more confident than she felt. "He'll be fine." But as the storm intensified, she began to wonder if she'd just told the first lie these children had heard from her lips. The wind grew worse. Something crashed in the yard, wood splintering, metal clanging. Through the window, Rosa caught glimpses of the world outside between lightning flashes. Trees bent nearly horizontal, debris flying past, the barn barely visible through the deluge. Then came a sound that made her blood run cold. A horse's scream, high and terrified, cutting through even the roar of the storm. Elena was on her feet instantly. "That's Sterling! Papa's horse!" "Sit down," Rosa commanded. "But Sterling, your father will handle it. What if he can't? What if the barn's flooding or the roof's coming off or—" Another scream from the horse, more desperate this time. Elena ran for the door. Rosa was faster. She caught the girl around the waist and pulled her back. "No. Let me go. I have to help." "You'll get yourself killed." Rosa held her tight even as Elena struggled. "Listen to me. Your father made me promise to keep you all safe. That's what I'm doing." "Sterling's scared. Someone has to—" "I'll go." The words left Rosa's mouth before she fully realized she'd made the decision. Elena stopped struggling and stared at her. The other girls stared too. "Rosa, you promised Papa," Iris said quietly. "I know." Rosa released Elena and moved toward the door, grabbing Calder's rain slicker from the hook. It would be too big, but it was better than nothing. "Elena, you're in charge. Keep your sisters inside no matter what you hear. Understand?" "You can't go out there," Elena whispered. "You could die." Rosa cupped the girl's face in her hands. "And I could live. Sometimes you have to trust that doing the right thing will work out." She kissed Elena's forehead quickly. "Lock the door behind me." Then, before she could reconsider, before fear could paralyze her, Rosa stepped out into the storm. The wind hit her like a physical blow, nearly knocking her off her feet. Rain lashed her face, cold and sharp as needles. She could barely see 3 feet in front of her. The world had dissolved into water and darkness and howling wind. Rosa pulled the slicker tight and staggered forward, using the porch rail to guide herself. Her foot hit the first step and she nearly fell, caught herself, kept moving. The yard was a chaos of mud and debris. Something flew past her head, a shutter torn loose, spinning away into the darkness. Lightning flashed, and for one brilliant second she could see everything, the barn with its door hanging open, banging in the wind. The chicken coop collapsed on one side, and in the paddock beside the barn, a horse rearing and plunging, tangled in broken fence wire. Sterling. Rosa ran. Her shoes squelched in the mud, her dress caught on something and tore, but she kept going. The barn seemed impossibly far away, like running in a nightmare where the destination retreats with every step. Rain filled her mouth and nose. Thunder cracked directly overhead, so loud it felt like the sky splitting open. She reached the paddock fence and saw the problem immediately. Sterling had panicked, and crashed through the weak section of fence they hadn't gotten around to repairing. Now wire was wrapped around his legs, cutting into his flesh as he thrashed. Blood mixed with rain on his coat. "Easy, boy," Rosa called, though she could barely hear her own voice. "Easy now." The horse's eyes were white-rimmed with terror. He reared again, and Rosa saw the barn door swing wider, revealing Calder inside, struggling with two other panicked horses. He hadn't heard Sterling, or he had, but couldn't leave the others. Rosa looked at the tangled wire, at the terrified animal, at her own soft hands that had never dealt with anything more dangerous than a stubborn stove. She thought about her promise to Calder, about the girls watching from the house, about how easy it would be to run back to safety. Then she climbed the fence. The ground inside the paddock was treacherous, churned to soup by the horses' hooves. Rosa approached slowly, hands out, making herself as small and non-threatening as possible. "Sterling, good boy, I'm here to help." The horse rolled his eyes at her but stopped thrashing for a moment. Rosa took advantage of the stillness to move closer. The wire was wound tight around his front legs, cutting deeper with every movement. She needed to get it off before he injured himself permanently. She knelt in the mud, reaching for the wire with trembling hands. The metal was slick with rain and blood. Her fingers slipped, couldn't find purchase. Sterling shifted nervously, and she felt the wire bite into her palm as it tightened. No, stay still, please stay still." A hand closed over hers. Rosa looked up to find Calder beside her, soaked to the skin, his face grim and furious. "What the hell are you doing out here?" "Helping! I told you to stay inside." "And I told Elena the same thing, but sometimes we don't listen." Rosa pulled her hand free and grabbed the wire again. "Are you going to help me or argue with me?" For a heartbeat, Calder just stared at her. Then, "Help. Always help." He pulled a tool from his belt, wire cutters. "Hold his leg steady." Rosa gripped Sterling's foreleg while Calder worked. The horse danced nervously, but between the two of them they managed to keep him relatively still. The first strand of wire snapped, then the second. Lightning flashed again, turning the world white, and in that frozen moment Rosa saw everything with terrible clarity. Calder's hands sure and quick, the blood on the horse's legs, the barn door slamming in the wind, the tree behind them bending so far she was sure it would snap. The third wire came free. Sterling pulled away immediately, limping but mobile, and trotted toward the barn as fast as his injured legs would carry him. "Go," Calder said, pointing toward the house. "Now, before—" The tree cracked like a gunshot. Rosa looked up in time to see the old oak at the edge of the paddock, the one she'd noticed was diseased but hadn't mentioned because there were so many other priorities, begin to fall. Not toward them, thank God, but toward the barn, toward the opening where Sterling had just disappeared inside. "No!" Calder was running before the word finished leaving his mouth. Rosa ran too, though every instinct screamed at her to go the other way. They reached the barn entrance just as the tree crashed down, missing the doorway by inches but taking out a section of the wall. Wood exploded inward. The horses inside screamed and kicked at their stalls. Calder dove inside. Rosa followed and found chaos. The tree had punched a hole in the barn wall, letting rain pour through. The horses were panicking, two of them loose, one trying to kick through its stall door. Sterling huddled in the corner, favoring his injured legs. And in the hayloft above, Rosa could see flames starting to lick up through the hole where lightning had apparently struck earlier. "Fire!" she shouted, pointing. Calder swore. "Get the horses out, all of them. I'll handle the fire." "That's insane." "Rosa, if this barn goes, we lose everything. Our food stores, equipment, everything we need to survive." His face was set with desperate determination. "Please, get them out." There was no time to argue. Rosa grabbed the nearest horse's halter, one of the big draft horses, already half wild with fear. She'd handled horses before, but never like this. Never in the middle of a storm with fire crackling overhead and the world trying to tear itself apart. "Come on, girl," she said, keeping her voice as calm as she could manage. "That's it. We're going outside where there's no fire. It's all right." The horse resisted, then reluctantly let Rosa lead her toward the gaping hole in the wall. They squeezed through, out into the rain, and Rosa directed her toward the far paddock, away from the damaged fence. One down. She went back for the second loose horse. This one was smaller but more panicked, rearing and plunging. Rosa had to dart around flying hooves, talking constantly, until finally she got close enough to grab the dangling lead rope. She pulled the horse toward the opening, dodging debris, and pushed her outside. 2 down. 3 to go. Inside the barn, Calder was in the loft, beating at flames with a blanket. The fire wasn't spreading fast, the rain coming through the hole was helping, but smoke was filling the upper level. Rosa could hear him coughing. The third horse was Sterling. Rosa approached him carefully, mindful of his injuries and his fear. "It's all right, boy. I know you're hurt, but we need to move." Sterling nickered softly, and Rosa realized with a start that he recognized her. She'd been feeding him apples from the kitchen, sneaking him treats when Calder wasn't looking. Now that small kindness paid off. Sterling let her take his halter and limped beside her toward the opening. As they passed beneath the loft, Rosa heard a crack that turned her blood to ice. She looked up and saw the flames had reached one of the support beams. The wood was old, dried out from years of summer heat. As she watched, the beam split, and the entire front section of the loft floor began to sag. Calder was on that section, still beating at flames, focused and unaware. "Calder!" Rosa screamed. "Get down! Now!" He looked up, saw the sagging floor, and tried to move. But the blanket had caught on something, and those precious seconds of delay made all the difference. The loft floor collapsed. Calder fell with it, disappearing into a crash of burning wood and hay. Rosa heard herself screaming his name, but the sound was distant, like it was coming from someone else's mouth. Sterling pulled free from her grip and fled outside. Rosa ran toward the wreckage, her mind blank with terror. "Calder, where are you?" A groan came from beneath a pile of charred boards. Rosa started pulling them away, ignoring the heat, ignoring the splinters driving into her already cut palms. A beam shifted and revealed Calder's face, blood running from a cut on his forehead. "Get out!" he rasped. "Barn's not safe. Shut up and help me." Rosa grabbed his arm and pulled. He was heavier than he looked, and for a horrible moment she thought she wouldn't be able to move him. Then he shifted, using his legs to push while she pulled, and together they got him free of the debris. Rosa slung his arm over her shoulder and half dragged, half carried him toward the opening. Her back screamed in protest. Her legs shook with effort, but she kept moving, step by agonizing step, while behind them more of the loft collapsed, and fire spread across the fallen timber. They stumbled out into the rain and kept going, putting distance between themselves and the barn. When they were far enough away that Rosa's lungs stopped burning from smoke, she lowered Calder to the ground and knelt beside him in the mud. "You're bleeding," she said, touching his forehead. "I'm fine." He tried to sit up, winced, fell back. "The barn is still standing, mostly." Rosa looked back through the rain. The fire was dying, drowned by the storm that had started it. The hole in the wall was large, and there was damage, but the structure itself was intact. "We saved it." "We saved each other," Calder said. He reached up and touched her face, his hand gentle despite its cuts and burns. "You shouldn't have come out here." "Neither should you." "It's my ranch." "It's my home too," Rosa said, and realized as she said it that it was true. Somewhere in the past 2 months, this place had stopped being just a refuge and become something more, something worth fighting for, worth risking everything for. Calder's eyes widened slightly. Then he smiled, tired and bloody, and more beautiful than anything Rosa had ever seen. "Yeah, I suppose it is." They helped each other stand and made their way back toward the house, supporting each other, 2 battered survivors of the storm's fury. As they approached the porch, the door flew open and 5 girls spilled out, Lily in the lead. "Papa, Rosa." They were surrounded by arms and tears and voices all talking at once. Elena was crying openly, checking her father for injuries. Violet clung to Rosa's waist. Iris kept saying, "You're alive," like a prayer. "We're fine," Calder assured them, though he swayed on his feet. "Everyone inside, now." They crowded into the house, and Rosa locked the door behind them, shutting out the storm that was finally beginning to weaken. The wind's howl had dropped to a roar, the rain from sheets to a steady pour. The worst had passed. Rosa looked around at the family gathered in the lamplit kitchen, muddy, bloody, terrified, and whole. and felt something shift in her chest. A wall she'd built around her heart after losing Lucia, after being betrayed by the Ashfords, after learning that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. That wall cracked, and light poured through. These people needed her, and God help her, she needed them too. "All right," she said, taking charge because someone had to, and Calder looked ready to collapse. "Elena, get your father into a chair. Iris, I need clean water and bandages. Violet, find the whiskey. Your papa's going to need it for those burns. Daisy, check on your sisters and make sure no one's injured. Lily, you're my assistant. Come help me." They scattered to follow her instructions, and Rosa moved through the familiar motions of caring for people she loved. Because she did love them, she realized with a start. All of them. She loved Lily's boundless optimism and Daisy's quiet intelligence. She loved Violet's gentleness and Iris's helpful nature. She loved Elena's fierce protectiveness of her family. And Calder, she pushed that thought away and focused on cleaning the cut on his forehead. "This is going to sting," she warned. "Can't be worse than falling through a burning floor. Don't make jokes. You could have died." Her hands shook as she dabbed at the wound. "You could have died and left these girls without a father." "But I didn't, thanks to you." Calder caught her wrist gently. "Rosa, look at me." She met his eyes, and the intensity in them made her breath catch. "You saved my life tonight," he said quietly. "You risked everything, broke your promise, went against every instinct that told you to stay safe. Why?" Rosa opened her mouth, closed it, struggled to find words. "Because I couldn't lose you," she finally whispered. "Because this family needs you. Because I—" She stopped, terrified of what she'd been about to say. But Calder's expression softened with understanding. "Because you care." "Yes." It was barely a sound. "Good," he said simply. "Because I care too." The girls had gone quiet, watching this exchange with wide eyes. Rosa became aware of 5 sets of eyes fixed on them, 5 faces lit with something that looked like hope. She pulled away gently and stood. "Everyone needs to get dry and warm. Lily, can you help your sisters? I need to finish tending your father's injuries." The girls dispersed slowly, reluctantly, shooting knowing glances at each other. When they were alone in the kitchen, Rosa finished bandaging Calder's burns in silence. The storm outside had gentled to a steady rain. Inside, the only sounds were the crackling fire and the quiet hiss of Calder's breath when she touched a particularly tender spot. "Rosa," he said when she'd finished. "Thank you. For everything. For coming to this family. For bringing life back to this house. For being brave tonight. For—" He stopped, searching for words. "For being you." Rosa's throat tightened. "I should thank you. You gave me a home when I had nothing, a purpose when I thought I'd lost everything. You gave us more than that." Calder stood slowly, towering over her. "You gave us hope. You gave my daughters a reason to smile again. You gave me—" He trailed off, his eyes searching her face. "What?" Rosa whispered. "A reason to believe in second chances." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Rosa knew they were standing on the edge of something that could change everything or ruin everything. She thought about Grace, about the life Calder had built with her, about the love that still lived in the photographs and memories throughout this house. "I can't replace her," Rosa said softly. "I don't want you to." Calder's hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle despite its roughness. "Grace was my past, a beautiful past I'll always treasure. But Rosa, you feel like my future." Rosa closed her eyes against the tears that threatened. "Calder, I'm just the housekeeper. You're so much more than that, to me, to the girls, to this family." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "And I think you know it." She did know it, had known it for weeks maybe, but had been too afraid to acknowledge it. Too afraid of wanting something this good, this whole, this precious. Too afraid of losing it the way she'd lost everything else. But tonight, she'd run into a storm to save a horse. She'd pulled a man from burning rubble. She'd fought for this family like it was her own. Maybe it was time to stop being afraid. Rosa opened her eyes and looked up at Calder. "I do know it," she said, "and it terrifies me." "Good." His smile was small but real. Because it terrifies me too. Then he bent down and pressed his forehead to hers, a gesture of intimacy that asked for nothing and offered everything. They stood like that for a long moment, breathing together, battered and exhausted and alive. From the hallway came a whispered, "Are they kissing?" "I can't see. Move your head. Everyone's in the way." "Shh. Papa will hear us." Calder pulled back with a quiet laugh. "I think we have an audience." Rosa smiled despite herself. "I think you're right. We should probably talk about this, about what it means." "We should," Rosa agreed, "but not tonight. Tonight, everyone needs to rest and recover. Tomorrow, then?" "Tomorrow." But as Rosa headed toward her room and Calder gathered his daughters for the trek upstairs, they both knew something fundamental had shifted. The storm outside had broken something open inside, had washed away the last barriers between them. Tomorrow they would assess the damage to the barn and garden. Tomorrow they would repair fences and clean up debris. Tomorrow they would face whatever challenges the storm had left in its wake. But tonight, as Rosa lay in her small room listening to the rain finally soften to a whisper, she let herself imagine a future she'd never dared to dream before. A future where she wasn't just passing through, wasn't just the help, wasn't just someone making do until something better came along. A future where she belonged, where she was home. Morning came too soon, bringing with it the harsh reality of what the storm had left behind. Rosa woke to bright sunlight streaming through her window and the sound of hammering. She dressed quickly, wincing at the soreness in her muscles, the sting of cuts on her palms that she'd barely noticed last night in the chaos. Her reflection in the small mirror showed bruises on her arms, mud still crusted in her hair, despite her attempts to wash it out. She looked like she'd been through a war. In some ways, she supposed she had. The kitchen was empty when she entered, but coffee sat warm on the stove and someone had laid out bread and butter. Through the window, Rosa could see Calder in the yard with Elena, surveying the damage. The chicken coop was a total loss. Its roof caved in and walls collapsed. The garden she'd worked so hard to restore was a muddy ruin, plants torn up and scattered. The neat rows she'd created obliterated. Fence posts lay at drunken angles. Debris was everywhere. Broken branches, torn shingles, pieces of things she couldn't even identify. But the barn still stood. Wounded, yes, with that gaping hole in its side and burn marks scarring the loft, but standing. Rosa poured herself coffee and stepped out onto the porch. The younger girls were already at work, picking up smaller pieces of debris and piling them near the barn. Lily waved when she saw Rosa, her smile bright despite the destruction around them. "Rosa, you're awake. Papa said to let you sleep, but I'm glad you're up because there's so much to do," and Lily paused for breath, then noticed Rosa's bandaged hands. "Do your hands hurt?" "A little," Rosa admitted, "but I'll be fine." "You were so brave last night," Violet said quietly, approaching with an armful of broken branches. "We watched from the window. We saw you go into the barn when it was on fire." "That was stupid," Iris added, but her eyes were warm. "Brave, but stupid." "Sometimes bravery and stupidity look the same," Rosa said with a small smile. "The difference is whether you survive it." Elena walked over, Calder a few steps behind. In the daylight, Rosa could see the full extent of his injuries, the bandage on his forehead, burns on his arms, the way he moved stiffly, favoring his left side. But his eyes were clear and determined. "Morning," he said. "You should have slept longer." "So should you." "Couldn't. Too much to do." He gestured at the yard. "It's worse than I thought. The chicken coop's a complete loss. Half the fence needs replacing. The garden—" He trailed off, seeing Rosa's expression. "Can be replanted," she said firmly. "The roots are probably still alive underground. Gardens are tougher than they look." "Like their gardener," Elena said, and Rosa heard something new in the girl's voice. Respect, maybe even affection. "We're going to need help," Calder continued. "More hands than we have. I was thinking of riding into town, asking some of the neighbors." "Reyes!" They all turned to see a rider approaching fast, horse kicking up dust from the muddy road. As he got closer, Rosa recognized him, Bill Henderson, who owned the ranch 2 miles south. He pulled up near the porch, his face grave. "Heard about the storm," Henderson said, dismounting. "Came to see if you needed help." Looks like you do. Appreciate it, Bill, Calder said, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Storm did a number on us. Did a number on everyone. Lost part of my roof, couple trees down. But we came through all right. Henderson's eyes swept over the damage, then landed on Rosa. Ma'am, you must be the one Bill's wife told me about. Said Reyes had hired help. Rosa Calderon, she said, stepping forward to shake his hand despite her bandaged palms. Henderson's grip was careful. Heard you've been good for this family. Glad to see it's true. He turned back to Calder. I brought my 2 boys. They're waiting at the road. Figured you could use the extra hands. More than you know. Over the next hour, more neighbors arrived. The Johnsons from the east with their teenage daughter, old Mr. Chen and his grandson, the widow Martinez with food enough to feed an army, even some people Rosa had never seen before, who'd simply heard that the Reyes ranch had been hit hard and came to help because that's what neighbors did. They organized quickly, sorting themselves into teams. Some worked on the fence, some on clearing debris, some on temporary repairs to the barn. The women gathered in the kitchen with Rosa, preparing food for the workers, tending minor injuries, keeping the younger children occupied and out of the way. You've got a good setup here, Mrs. Johnson said, kneading dough beside Rosa. Clean house, well-organized kitchen. That's hard to maintain with 5 children in ranch work. Rosa keeps everything running, Elena said from the doorway, surprising everyone. She's good at it. Mrs. Johnson smiled knowingly. I'm sure she is. Calder's lucky to have found you, Miss Calderon. Rosa felt her cheeks warm. I'm the lucky one. This family gave me a home when I had nowhere else to go. Where were you before? The widow Martinez asked, not unkindly. The question Rosa had been dreading. She kept her eyes on the vegetables she was chopping. I worked for a family in town, the Ashfords. There was a misunderstanding, and they let me go. The Ashfords? Mrs. Johnson's tone sharpened. Margaret Ashford? Yes. That woman wouldn't know the truth if it bit her. Mrs. Johnson shook her head. My sister worked for them years ago, left after Mrs. Ashford accused her of stealing a brooch that turned up in Mrs. Ashford's own jewelry box a week later. No apology, of course, just told my sister she was no longer needed. Rosa's hand stilled on the knife. She did the same thing to someone else? She's done it to 3 housekeepers that I know of, Martinez added. It's how she avoids paying final wages, makes an accusation, threatens to call the law, and the poor woman leaves with nothing rather than face jail. She touched Rosa's arm gently. Whatever she accused you of, child, no one here will believe it. The relief that washed through Rosa was so intense she had to blink back tears. She'd carried the shame of that accusation for months, had let it poison her sense of self-worth. To learn that others had suffered the same injustice, that people who knew Mrs. Ashford didn't believe her accusations, it was like a weight lifting from her chest. Thank you, she whispered. Nothing to thank us for, just the truth. Mrs. Johnson went back to her kneading. Now, Calder seems quite taken with you. How long before we hear wedding bells? Mrs. Johnson! Rosa's face flamed. Oh, don't play coy. I saw how he looked at you when we arrived, like you hung the moon and stars. She winked. And those girls of his adore you. Even Elena, and that one doesn't warm up to anyone easily. We're just... Rosa struggled for words. It's complicated. Love usually is, Martinez said sagely, but that doesn't make it any less real. Before Rosa could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they could see a fine carriage rolling up the drive, completely out of place among the work wagons and simple horses. Rosa's stomach tightened with unease. The carriage stopped near the house, and a familiar figure stepped out. Victor Dalton, dressed impeccably despite the muddy conditions, surveying the storm damage with an expression of satisfaction that made Rosa's skin crawl. Calder had seen him too. He set down the post he'd been carrying and walked over, his face carefully neutral. Dalton, didn't expect to see you today. I heard about the storm. Wanted to see how badly you were hit. Dalton's eyes swept over the destruction, lingering on the damaged barn. Looks like it was worse than I thought. We're managing. Are you? Dalton pulled out a handkerchief and dabbed at his forehead, despite the cool morning air. Because from where I stand, Reyes, you just lost whatever margin you had. That barn needs serious repairs. Your fence is destroyed. Your chicken coop is gone, and you still owe me for those cattle. I'm aware of my debts. Are you aware that I could call them in right now, force a sale to cover what you owe me?" Dalton stepped closer, his voice dropping but still audible to the workers who'd stopped to watch. "One bad season," I said. "Looks like you just had it." Rosa was moving before she made the conscious decision to do so. She walked out of the house, down the porch steps, and positioned herself beside Calder. Several other women followed, forming a quiet wall of support. "Mr. Dalton," Rosa said, her voice carrying across the yard. "I'm surprised to see you here." Dalton's expression soured when he recognized her. "The hired help. I'd forgotten about you." "Funny. I haven't forgotten about you." Rosa crossed her arms, ignoring the sting in her palms. "Seems to me a decent neighbor would have arrived with tools and willing hands, not threats, and a smile at another man's misfortune." A murmur ran through the gathered workers. Henderson coughed, sounding suspiciously like he was covering a laugh. Dalton's face reddened. "I'm here to discuss business with Reyes. That doesn't concern you." "Everything that concerns this family concerns me," Rosa said flatly. "And I'm curious about this debt you keep mentioning. The cattle you sold Mr. Reyes, were they healthy?" "Of course they were, because I heard from Mr. Henderson that 3 of them died within a month of purchase. Diseased," he said. "Strange that disease would show up so quickly unless they were already sick when they were sold." Dalton's jaw tightened. "That's a serious accusation." "Is it an accusation or a question?" Rosa kept her voice level. "Because if you sold sick cattle knowingly, that's fraud, Mr. Dalton, and it would certainly affect how much is actually owed to you." "I sold healthy animals. If they got sick after, that's not my problem." "Isn't it, though?" Henderson stepped forward, and Rosa felt a surge of gratitude. "Because I bought cattle from you around the same time, Dalton, and I lost too. Same symptoms. When I tried to discuss it with you, you told me buyer beware. That's just ranching. Animals die sometimes. Not like this, they don't." Old Mr. Chen spoke up from near the barn. "My nephew bought a horse from you last spring, dead in 3 weeks. Lung disease that the vet said the animal had been carrying for months." More voices joined in. The widow Martinez's cousin who'd bought feed that turned out to be moldy. The Johnsons' neighbor who'd paid for quality lumber and received rotted wood. One by one, people shared stories of Dalton's business practices, and a picture emerged of a man who'd been cheating his neighbors for years. Dalton's face went from red to purple. "This is slander. I could sue every one of you." "Go ahead," Rosa said quietly. "But maybe you should consider that everyone here is willing to testify under oath about their experiences. Are you willing to do the same about your business practices?" For a long moment, Dalton stood frozen, his eyes darting from face to face, seeing only hostility and righteous anger. Then his gaze landed on Rosa, and his expression twisted with something ugly. "You think you're clever, don't you? Think you've won?" He stepped toward her, and Calder immediately moved between them. "I know all about you, Miss Calderon. Or should I say, Thief Calderon?" Rosa's blood turned to ice. "That's right," Dalton continued, his voice dripping with venom. "I made some inquiries after our last meeting, asked around about the large woman who showed up out of nowhere to work for Reyes. And what did I hear? That you were fired from the Ashford house for stealing. That you're lucky they didn't press charges." "That's a lie," Elena's voice rang out. She'd appeared beside Rosa, her young face fierce. "Mrs. Ashford is a liar who accuses people so she doesn't have to pay them. Everyone knows it." "Everyone?" Dalton laughed harshly. "Or just the people here who want to believe this woman's sob story? Wake up, Reyes. You've invited a thief into your home, around your children. How long before she steals from you, too?" "Get off my land." Calder's voice was dangerously quiet. "Gladly, but don't say I didn't warn you." Dalton turned back to his carriage, then paused. "You have 2 weeks, Reyes. 2 weeks to pay what you owe me in full, or I'm calling in the debt and forcing a sale. See how your loyal neighbors help you then." He climbed into his carriage and snapped at his driver. As they rolled away, silence fell over the yard. Rosa stood frozen, her worst shame exposed to everyone, her past laid bare for judgment. She wanted to run, to hide, to disappear. But before she could move, Mrs. Johnson was beside her. That man is a snake, the older woman said firmly, and Margaret Ashford is a liar. Don't you dare let them make you feel ashamed. She's right, Henderson added. Anyone with eyes can see you're honest. The way you've cared for this family, the way you stood up to Dalton just now, that's not the behavior of a thief. One by one, the other neighbors voiced their agreement, but Rosa barely heard them. She was looking at Calder, searching his face for doubt, for suspicion, for the first signs of betrayal. Instead, she saw fury. "Everyone back to work," Calder said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "We've wasted enough time on that bastard." He turned to Rosa. "Can I talk to you?" "Inside?" Rosa's heart sank. This was it. He was going to ask her to leave, to pack her things, and go before she could bring more trouble to his family. She followed him into the house, her legs leaden, while the girls watched with worried faces. Calder closed the door behind them and turned to face her. For a moment he just looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then he closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. Rosa stood rigid with shock. You don't think I stole from them?" "Of course not." His voice was muffled against her hair. "Rosa, I've watched you these past months. I've seen how you care for my children, how you handle every penny like it matters, how you've never taken anything that wasn't freely given. I know who you are, and you're no thief." The relief was so intense it hurt. Rosa sagged against him, her carefully maintained composure crumbling. "I thought you'd believe him. I believe you. The girls believe you. Everyone out there believes you." He pulled back to look at her face. "Dalton's just trying to hurt you because you made him look like a fool," which, for the record, was magnificent. Despite everything, Rosa felt a small smile tug at her lips. "Was it?" "You stood up to him without flinching, called him out in front of everyone. I don't think anyone's ever done that before." Calder's expression sobered. "But he wasn't lying about the debt. I do owe him money, and I don't have 2 weeks to pay it." "How much?" $300. Rosa's heart sank. That was a fortune. More money than she'd seen in years. "What happens if you can't pay?" "He can force a sale of the ranch, or part of it. Enough to cover the debt." Calder moved to the window, staring out at his land. "My father built this ranch from nothing. Grace and I raised our family here. It's all I have to give my daughters. And I might lose it because I trusted the wrong man. There has to be something we can do." "Like what?" "I don't have any assets to sell except livestock, and that won't bring enough. I could ask for loans, but who's going to lend to a man who's already in debt?" He turned back to her, his face lined with exhaustion and worry. "I'm out of options, Rosa." Rosa's mind raced. $300. 2 weeks. She thought about the jewelry she'd hidden in her suitcase. Her mother's wedding ring, a silver bracelet, a small locket with Lucia's picture. Altogether, they might bring $50 if she was lucky. Not nearly enough. "What about the neighbors?" she asked. "They came to help today. Maybe if you explained, 'I can't ask them to give me money.' That's different than helping with storm cleanup." Calder shook his head. "No, I'll figure something out. I have to." But Rosa could hear the desperation in his voice, could see the fear in his eyes, and she knew that fear. Had lived with it herself not so long ago, when she'd walked that empty desert road with nowhere to go. This family had saved her. Now she would do whatever it took to save them. Over the next few days, life found a strange new rhythm. The neighbors returned each morning to help with repairs, and slowly the ranch began to heal. The fence went back up, stronger than before. The chicken coop was rebuilt. The barn's wall was patched, though the scars remained visible. Even the garden showed signs of recovery, with Rosa replanting what could be saved and starting new seedlings to replace what was lost. But underneath the appearance of normalcy, tension hummed like a plucked string. Calder grew quieter, more withdrawn, spending long hours in his study poring over account books as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into salvation. The girls felt it too. Their earlier joy at surviving the storm replaced by a creeping anxiety they didn't fully understand but couldn't ignore. Rosa watched it all and made plans. On the 5th day after the storm, she told Calder she needed to go into town for supplies. He offered to accompany her, but she insisted she could manage alone. She borrowed the small wagon, hitched up the gentlest horse, and drove into town with her mother's jewelry hidden in her pocket and determination hardening her spine. The first stop was the jeweler's shop. Mr. Goldman had been in business for 30 years, and Rosa had heard he was honest. She laid her treasures on his counter, the ring, the bracelet, the locket, and waited while he examined them with his loupe. "These are good pieces," he said finally, "the ring especially. Old gold, well crafted. I can give you $60 for all three." "They're worth more than that," Rosa protested. "To you, maybe. To me, I have to resell them. 60 is fair." Rosa thought about arguing, but time was slipping away. "All right, 60. She left the shop with money in her pocket and an ache in her heart. Those pieces had been her last connection to her mother, to Lucia, to the life she'd had before everything fell apart. But they were just things. The Reyes family was real, was living, was worth more than any amount of gold. Next, she went to the bank. She'd been saving her wages, small as they were, and had managed to accumulate $43. She withdrew it all, leaving her account empty. $103. Still nowhere near enough. Rosa sat in the wagon, thinking furiously. She'd seen the account books over Calder's shoulder. She knew what the ranch brought in, what it cost to run. Even if they scraped together the money for Dalton, they'd be left with nothing for the winter, no buffer for emergencies. They needed more than just enough to pay the debt. They needed security. An idea began to form. Risky. Possibly foolish, but possibly the only chance they had. Rosa drove the wagon to the finest house in town, a sprawling white mansion with columns and manicured gardens, the Ashford House. Her heart hammered as she climbed down and approached the door, but she forced her spine straight, her chin up. She knocked. The housekeeper who answered was new, someone Rosa didn't recognize. "Deliveries are at the back." "I'm not here for a delivery. I need to speak with Mrs. Ashford." "Mrs. Ashford doesn't receive uninvited guests." "Tell her Rosa Calderon is here. She'll see me." The housekeeper looked doubtful, but disappeared inside. After a long moment, she returned. "Mrs. Ashford says she has nothing to say to you, and you should leave before she calls the sheriff. Tell her I have proof she lied about the stolen necklace, and if she doesn't see me in the next 5 minutes, I'll be taking that proof to the sheriff myself." It was a bluff. Rosa had no proof. But she was betting on Mrs. Ashford's guilty conscience and fear of exposure. The housekeeper's eyes widened. She vanished again, and this time when she returned, she grudgingly held the door open. 5 minutes. In the parlor. Rosa followed her inside, memories assaulting her with every step. This house where she'd spent 10 years of her life, where she'd been invisible until suddenly she'd been too visible, accused and discarded. The parlor was just as she remembered, overstuffed furniture, expensive decorations, the faint smell of the rosewater Mrs. Ashford wore. Margaret Ashford swept in moments later, her face pinched with anger and anxiety. "You have nerve coming here. What is it you want? Money? Blackmail?" "I want you to tell the truth," Rosa said evenly. "About what?" "About your necklace. About where you really found it." Mrs. Ashford's expression flickered. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do, because you've done this before. 3 times that I know of. You accuse your housekeepers of theft so you don't have to pay final wages. But this time I'm not going away quietly. You have no proof." "Don't I?" Rosa pulled out the small notebook she'd brought. "I visited the last 3 housekeepers you fired. They were happy to sign statements about their experiences. Very similar to mine. A pattern of false accusations. She'd actually only managed to find one of the women, and the statement was merely a friendly letter, but Mrs. Ashford didn't need to know that. I wonder what the town would think if they knew how you treat the people who work for you." Mrs. Ashford's face paled. "What do you want?" $200. "That's extortion." "No, it's back wages and compensation for emotional distress and damage to my reputation." Rosa kept her voice steady. "You ruined my life with a lie, Mrs. Ashford. $200 is a small price for your reputation and social standing." For a long moment, Mrs. Ashford simply stared at her. Then slowly, she moved to the writing desk and pulled out a checkbook. Her hand shook slightly as she wrote, and when she turned back to Rosa, her eyes were hard with hatred. "Take it and go. And if you ever come back here, if you ever speak about this to anyone, I'll make sure you never work in this town again." Rosa took the check without flinching. You don't have that power anymore. You only had it when I was afraid. I'm not afraid of you now. She walked out with her head high, Mrs. Ashford's fury burning into her back. Outside, she let herself shake for a moment, letting the adrenaline work through her system. Then she climbed into the wagon and headed back to the ranch. $303. Enough to pay Dalton with a small cushion left over, enough to save the ranch, to protect the family, to buy them time. Rosa knew what she'd done was risky, possibly illegal, but she also knew she'd do it again in a heartbeat. When she arrived back at the ranch, Calder was working on the fence near the road. He looked up as she approached, his face lighting with relief. You were gone a long time. I was starting to worry. I had errands to run. Rosa climbed down from the wagon, her legs unsteady. Can we talk? Inside? Something in her voice made his expression sharpen. He nodded and followed her into the house, into his study where the account book still lay open on the desk. Rosa pulled out the money, the cash from her jewelry and savings, the check from Mrs. Ashford, and laid it all on top of the ledgers. Calder stared at it, uncomprehending. What is this? $303, Rosa said. Enough to pay Dalton, enough to save the ranch. Where did you... He looked up at her, his eyes wide with shock and something else. Rosa, what did you do? What I had to do. She met his gaze steadily. I sold my jewelry, withdrew my savings, and I went to see Mrs. Ashford. You what? I confronted her, made her admit what she'd done. She paid me what she owed me in back wages and compensation. It wasn't quite a lie. Calder, this family gave me everything when I had nothing. Let me give something back. I can't take your money, your savings, your jewelry. Rosa, those were yours. And I'm giving them to you, to this family, to our home. She reached out and took his hands. Please, let me help. Let me be part of saving this place. Calder's throat worked. He looked down at the money, then back at her, his eyes suspiciously bright. I don't deserve you. You do. You all do. Rosa squeezed his hands. You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You gave me a reason to keep going. This money, it's nothing compared to what you've given me. It's everything, Calder said hoarsely. Rosa, it's literally everything you had. No. She smiled, feeling tears on her own cheeks now. Everything I have is right here, in this house, this family. You. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Calder's hands tightened on hers, and for a moment Rosa thought he might pull her into his arms. But voices in the hallway made them both step back, the girls returning from afternoon chores, their laughter bright and oblivious. Tonight, Calder said quietly, after the girls are in bed, we need to talk. Really talk. I know, Rosa whispered. Tonight. But first there was a debt to pay and a ranch to save. The next morning, Calder rode out to Dalton's ranch with the full payment in his saddlebag. Rosa watched him go, her heart in her throat, praying that Dalton would accept the money and walk away, that this would truly be the end of it. He returned hours later, his face grim but satisfied. It's done. He took the money, tried to make it difficult, but I had witnesses. Henderson and Mr. Chen rode with me. The debt is paid. Relief flooded through Rosa so intensely she had to sit down. It's over? It's over. Calder crossed to her and pulled her to her feet, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Thanks to you. Rosa, I don't know how to thank you. You saved everything. We saved each other, Rosa said. That's what families do. And as his arms came around her, as she felt his heart beating against hers, Rosa knew with absolute certainty that she was finally, truly home. That evening, after the dishes were washed and the girls tucked into bed, Rosa found herself on the front porch once again. The air was cool and clear, stars scattered across the velvet sky like diamonds on black cloth. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and settled into the rocking chair, her hands folded in her lap, waiting. She didn't have to wait long. The door opened and Calder stepped out, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He offered her one and took the seat beside her, the old wooden chair creaking under his weight. For a long moment, they simply sat in companionable silence, sipping coffee and listening to the night sounds. Crickets chirping, a distant coyote's howl, the soft rustle of wind through the grass. "I keep thinking about what you said," Calder finally spoke, his voice low and thoughtful, "about how we saved each other. It's true. I know, but I'm not sure you understand how true it is." He set down his coffee cup and turned to face her. "When Grace died, I died too. Not physically, but inside. I was just going through the motions, doing what needed to be done because the girls needed me to. But there was nothing left of the man I used to be. Just this hollow shell trying to remember how to live." Rosa's throat tightened. "Calder? Let me finish. Please." He reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Then you showed up. This woman who'd been kicked when she was down, who had every reason to be bitter and broken, but instead you just rolled up your sleeves and got to work. You brought light back into this house. You made my daughters laugh again. You made me remember what it felt like to hope." "You did the same for me," Rosa said softly. "I was lost when you found me, literally and figuratively. You gave me purpose when I thought I'd never matter to anyone again. You matter to us. God, Rosa, you matter so much." His hand tightened on hers. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about. What happens now?" Rosa's heart began to race. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you came here as a housekeeper, but you're not just that anymore. You haven't been for a long time." He shifted closer, his eyes searching her face in the starlight. "You're part of this family. The girls love you. He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "I love you." The words hung in the air between them, precious and terrifying. Rosa felt tears prick her eyes, felt her breath catch in her chest. "You don't have to say that. You don't have to feel obligated because I helped with the debt. That's not why I'm saying it." Calder cupped her face in his hands, gentle and sure. "I'm saying it because it's true. Because I've been falling for you since the day you stood up to Dalton in my yard. Because watching you with my daughters, seeing how you care for them, how you've brought joy back into their lives, it made me realize I want you here not as an employee but as family, as my wife." Rosa's breath left her in a rush. "Calder, I know it's complicated. I know you might still have feelings about Grace, about whether there's room for you in a house that was hers first. But Rosa, Grace would have loved you. She would have been grateful that her daughters have someone like you in their lives. And I hope, she would understand that my loving you doesn't diminish what I felt for her." "I know that," Rosa said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've never wanted to replace her. She was your first love, the mother of your children, and she'll always have that place in your heart. I wouldn't want to take that away." "But there's room for you too," Calder said. "So much room. Rosa, my heart is big enough for both of you, for the memory of what I had and the hope of what we could have together." Rosa closed her eyes, feeling tears slip down her cheeks. She thought about Lucia, about the love she'd carried for her daughter all these years, about how loving Calder's girls hadn't diminished that love, but had given her a way to express it again, to be a mother again, even if not in the same way. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've been afraid to admit it, even to myself, afraid that wanting you and this family, was somehow selfish or wrong. But it's not wrong, is it? It's the most right thing I've felt in 2 years." Calder leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. "Marry me, Rosa. Not because you work here, or because you saved the ranch, but because we belong together. Because this family isn't complete without you." Rosa opened her eyes and looked at him, this good, honest man who'd shown her kindness when she needed it most, who'd given her a home and a purpose, and now was offering her his heart. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." Calder's smile was like sunrise breaking over the horizon. He kissed her then, gentle and sweet, a promise of all the tomorrows they would share. When they finally pulled apart, Rosa was laughing and crying at the same time. "The girls," she said suddenly. "We need to tell them, make sure they're all right with this." "I think they've been waiting for us to figure it out," Calder said with a chuckle. "Lily's been asking me when you're going to be her real mama for weeks now." "Has she?" Rosa felt warmth bloom in her chest. "And the others?" Elena told me last week that if I didn't marry you, I was a fool. Her exact words. He stood and pulled Rosa to her feet. Come on, let's go tell them together. They climbed the stairs to the girls' rooms. The younger four shared a large bedroom with 2 sets of bunk beds, while Elena had her own small room at the end of the hall. As they approached, Rosa heard whispers and giggles behind the door. Calder knocked. Girls, you awake? A pause, then Lily's voice trying to sound sleepy. Maybe? He opened the door to find all 5 girls wide awake, sitting on the beds in their nightgowns, clearly waiting. Elena was perched on the edge of Violet's bunk, trying to look nonchalant but failing to hide her interest. We thought you might still be up, Calder said, fighting a smile. Rosa and I have something to tell you. 5 pairs of eyes fixed on them, bright with anticipation. What is it, Papa? Daisy asked, though her grin suggested she already knew. Calder looked at Rosa, and she nodded, encouraging him to continue. He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. Rosa and I are getting married. If that's all right with all of you. The room exploded. Lily squealed and launched herself off the top bunk, managing to land on her feet before throwing herself at Rosa's waist. I knew it! I knew it! You're going to be our mama! Does this mean Rosa's staying forever? Violet asked, her quiet voice trembling with hope. Forever and always, Rosa promised, opening her arms to include all of them. Iris and Daisy joined the embrace, everyone talking at once, asking questions about the wedding and what Rosa would wear and could they have cake. In the middle of the chaos, Rosa looked up to find Elena still sitting on the bed, her expression unreadable. Rosa gently extracted herself from the younger girls and crossed to Elena. She sat down beside the teenager, not touching, just present. What do you think? Rosa asked quietly. Elena was silent for a long moment, her eyes fixed on her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. Are you going to try to be our mother? I'm going to try to be the best stepmother I can be, Rosa said carefully. But you already have a mother, Elena. A wonderful mother who loved you and whom you love. I'm not here to replace her or make you forget her. Then what are you here for? Rosa thought about the question, about how to express something so complex in words a grieving girl could understand. I'm here to love you, to take care of you, to be another adult in your life who thinks you're precious and important and worth protecting. Your mother and I will love you in different ways, from different places, but both loves are real. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I miss her so much. I know you do, sweetheart, and it's okay to miss her. It's okay to be sad sometimes, even while you're happy about other things. Rosa risked reaching out to brush a strand of hair from Elena's face. You can love me and still love her. They're not the same thing, and one doesn't cancel out the other. Promise? Elena's voice cracked. I promise. And Elena, I will never, ever ask you to call me Mama if you don't want to. You can call me Rosa forever, and that will be just fine with me. A sob escaped Elena's throat, and then she was in Rosa's arms, crying in a way Rosa suspected she hadn't allowed herself to cry since her mother's death. Rosa held her tight, rocking her gently, while the other girls gathered around them and Calder watched with tears in his own eyes. I'm glad Papa chose you, Elena whispered when her tears finally subsided. Mama would have liked you. I hope so, Rosa said, because I like her daughters very much. The girls stayed up too late that night, all of them piled on the beds talking about the wedding and the future. When Rosa and Calder finally got them settled and returned downstairs, exhaustion and happiness warred in Rosa's chest. That went well, Calder said, pulling her into his arms. Better than I hoped. Rosa rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. They're good girls, Calder. You and Grace raised them well. We started it. You're finishing it. He kissed the top of her head. So when should we do this? The wedding? Soon, Rosa said. I don't want to wait. Is that selfish? It's perfect. He pulled back to look at her. Next month? That gives us time to plan something simple but nice. Next month, Rosa agreed. But life, as it often does, had other plans. 3 days later, Rosa was in the kitchen preparing lunch when she heard the sound of multiple horses approaching. She looked out the window and saw a group of riders. Neighbors, she realized, along with some people she didn't recognize. Her stomach tightened with anxiety. Large groups usually meant trouble. Calder emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his pants as he walked to meet them. Henderson dismounted first, his face serious. "Calder, we need to talk." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, but there's something you should know." Henderson gestured to a thin man in a worn suit standing beside him. "This is Mr. Warren from the Territorial Land Office. He's been doing surveys in the valley." Rosa stepped out onto the porch, her heart racing. Land office meant legal matters, and legal matters were rarely good news. "Mr. Reyes," Warren said, pulling a document from his saddlebag. "In the course of my survey work, I've discovered some irregularities with the property boundaries in this area, specifically with Victor Dalton's ranch." "What kind of irregularities?" Calder asked warily. "The kind where Mr. Dalton has been claiming land that doesn't belong to him." Warren unfolded a map. According to the original survey from 1867 and the deed records, approximately 40 acres of what Dalton has been using as his eastern pasture actually belongs to you. Silence fell over the group. Rosa watched Calder's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and finally dawning understanding. "Are you certain?" he asked. "Completely certain. I've verified it against 3 separate sources. The boundary markers were moved sometime in the last 15 years, probably by Dalton or someone he paid. That land is legally yours, Mr. Reyes. Always has been." 40 acres, Calder repeated, seeming stunned. "That's prime grazing land, with a creek running through it." "Yes, sir, and according to territorial law, you're entitled to compensation for the years Dalton has been using it without your permission." Warren pulled out another document. "I've calculated fair market value for grazing rights over the past decade. Comes to approximately $800. Rosa gripped the porch rail, her knees suddenly weak. $800. It was a fortune. More than enough to rebuild everything they'd lost in the storm, and then some. "There's more," Henderson said, and his expression had shifted to something that looked almost like grim satisfaction. Once word got out about what Warren found, other people started asking him to check their boundaries too. Turns out Dalton's been pulling this trick all over the valley, moving markers, claiming land that isn't his, intimidating people into accepting it. "We're filing a collective lawsuit," Mrs. Johnson added from her horse, "demanding he return all the stolen land and pay compensation. With Warren's documentation, we've got him dead to rights." "He's ruined," Mr. Chen said simply. "Once this gets to court, he'll lose everything." Rosa watched the emotions play across Calder's face. Shock giving way to anger, anger giving way to something that looked almost like pity. Dalton had been their enemy, yes, but to see any man lose everything was sobering. "What do you need from me?" Calder asked. "Your testimony, your documentation, and your signature on the lawsuit." Warren handed him the papers. "The territorial judge will want to hear from everyone affected. With your case being one of the most clear-cut examples, you'll likely be called to testify first." Calder took the papers and studied them. Then he looked up at Rosa, standing on the porch, and she saw the question in his eyes. She nodded, trusting him to make the right decision. "I'll do it," he said. "Not for revenge, but because what he did was wrong, and people need to know the truth." The lawsuit moved forward quickly. Within 2 weeks, Dalton's land grab was public knowledge throughout the valley. The evidence was damning. Warren surveys, testimonies from dozens of neighbors, documentation of the moved boundary markers. Dalton tried to fight it, tried to claim honest mistakes and discrepancies in old records, but no one believed him. The trial took place in the territorial courthouse, a simple building that served 5 counties. Rosa sat in the gallery with the girls, watching as Calder took the stand and calmly, clearly explained what had happened. How he'd trusted Dalton, bought cattle from him, paid a fair price only to discover the animals were diseased. How Dalton had held that debt over him like a weapon, threatening his family's home and livelihood. How the land that should have been his had been stolen through fraud and intimidation. When it was over, the judge didn't even need to deliberate long. He ruled in favor of Calder and the other plaintiffs, ordering Dalton to return all stolen land and pay full compensation plus damages. The total came to several $1,000s, more than Dalton had, more than his ranch was worth even if he sold everything. Dalton's empire crumbled in a matter of days. His ranch was sold at auction to pay the judgments. His fine house was seized. His horses, his cattle, everything went to satisfy the debts he owed to the people he'd cheated. Rosa watched it happen and felt no satisfaction, only a quiet sense of justice being served. Dalton had built his wealth on cruelty and fraud, and now he was learning that such foundations were ultimately worthless. The 40 acres and $800 changed everything for the Reyes family. Calder was able to pay off the rest of his debts, buy new livestock, and make long overdue repairs to the ranch. He hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, taking some of the burden off his own shoulders. The garden was expanded, the chicken coop rebuilt bigger and better than before. But more than the material improvements, the resolution brought peace. The constant worry that had shadowed Calder for years lifted. His smiles came more easily. The lines around his eyes softened. And through it all, Rosa stood beside him, planning their wedding and building their future together. They were married on a Saturday in late October when the air was crisp and the valley dressed in autumn gold. It wasn't a large wedding, just neighbors and friends gathered in the yard of the ranch, with the local minister performing the ceremony under the oak tree that had survived the storm. Rosa wore a simple cream-colored dress that Mrs. Johnson had helped her sew. Elena had braided wildflowers into her hair. The younger girls stood beside her as attendants, their faces glowing with joy. Calder wore his best suit, and when he looked at Rosa, she saw everything in his eyes: love, gratitude, hope, and promise. "Do you, Calder James Reyes, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the minister asked. "I do," Calder said firmly. "I absolutely do." "And do you, Rosa Maria Calderon, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Rosa looked at Calder, at the girls watching with shining eyes, at the community gathered to celebrate their union, at the ranch that had become her home. "I do," she said, and her voice didn't waver. When they kissed, the girls cheered. Lily threw flower petals in the air. Henderson whooped, and Rosa felt something click into place inside her chest, a sense of belonging so complete and profound that it took her breath away. The celebration afterward was simple but joyful. Tables laden with food that neighbors had contributed, roasted chicken, fresh bread, pies, cakes. Music from Henderson's son on his fiddle, dancing on the grass as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Rosa danced with Calder, then with each of the girls in turn. Even Elena, who was trying very hard to maintain her teenage dignity, accepted a dance and smiled the whole time. As evening deepened into night and stars began to appear, Rosa found herself standing at the edge of the gathering, just watching. Watching her family, because they were her family now, truly and legally, laughing and celebrating. Watching the ranch that had saved her when she'd been lost and afraid. Watching the life she'd built from the ruins of her old one. "You all right?" Calder appeared beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. "More than all right," Rosa said. "I was just thinking about the day you found me on that road. If I'd kept walking instead of stopping, if you'd driven past instead of offering help, how different everything would be." "But you did stop, and I did help, and here we are." "Here we are," Rosa echoed, leaning into him. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think Grace sent me to you." The words came out softly, almost a confession. "I think somewhere, somehow, she knew her girls needed someone, and she guided me to that road at exactly the right moment." Calder was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I think you might be right. Grace believed in small miracles, in people helping each other when they needed it most. You showing up when you did, that was her kind of miracle." "I hope she knows I'll love them well," Rosa said. "Your daughters, our daughters." "She knows." Calder kissed her temple. "And she's grateful. I'm grateful." They stood together in the twilight, watching their wedding celebration wind down, watching their neighbors begin to pack up and head home. The girls were getting sleepy, Lily already nodding off in Iris's lap. Soon they would need to go inside to begin their first night as a newly formed family. But for now, Rosa just breathed in the moment. The cool air, the distant music, the solid warmth of Calder beside her, the knowledge that she had a home, a purpose, people who loved her and needed her. She thought about that desperate woman on the desert road, whispering prayers to a sky that seemed empty.
She wished she could go back and tell that woman what waited for her just around the bend. Tell her that sometimes losing everything was the only way to find what you were always meant to have. "Rosa?" Lily's sleepy voice called from the porch. "Are you coming inside? I want you to tuck me in." "I'll be right there, sweetheart," Rosa called back. She looked up at Calder, at this man who'd offered her shelter and ended up giving her so much more. Who'd needed a mother for his daughters and found a partner for his heart. "Come on, husband," she said, testing out the word and loving how it felt. "Our family needs us." "Our family," Calder repeated, like a prayer. I like the sound of that. They walked toward the house together, toward the warm light spilling from the windows, toward the voices of their daughters calling them home. Behind them, the ranch stretched out into the darkness, land they'd fought for, saved, and would build a future on together. Rosa had needed shelter, Calder had needed help, but what they'd found was so much more than either had asked for. They'd found each other. They'd found family. They'd found home. And in the end, that was everything. Inside the house, Rosa went from room to room, tucking in each girl with a kiss and a whispered goodnight. Elena surprised her by asking quietly if Rosa would stay and talk for a minute. "What's on your mind?" Rosa asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I was thinking about Mama today," Elena said. "During the ceremony, wondering what she'd think." "And what do you think she'd think?" Elena was quiet for a moment, then smiled. A real, genuine smile. "I think she'd be happy that Papa found you, that we found you. I think she'd say you're exactly what this family needed." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." "It's true, though." Elena reached out and squeezed Rosa's hand. "Thank you for loving us, for choosing us." "Oh, sweetheart," Rosa said, her voice thick. "You chose me first, all of you. You let me into your hearts and your home. I'm the one who should be grateful. Can we both be grateful?" "I think that's perfect." Rosa kissed Elena's forehead and stood to leave, but Elena's voice stopped her at the door. "Rosa, would it be okay if sometimes I called you Mama? Not all the time, but sometimes?" Rosa's heart felt too big for her chest. "That would be more than okay. That would be an honor." She closed the door and stood in the hallway for a moment, letting the tears fall freely now. Happy tears. Healing tears. Tears for everything she'd lost and everything she'd found. Calder was waiting for her in their room, the room that had been his and Grace's but was now theirs. Rosa had worried about this, about sleeping in Grace's space, but Calder had redecorated it together with her. New curtains, new bedding, Grace's personal items carefully packed and given to the girls to keep. A space that honored the past but welcomed the future. "The girls settled?" he asked as she entered. "All tucked in and happy." Rosa moved to the window, looking out at the moonlit ranch. "Elena called me Mama." She heard Calder's sharp intake of breath, then felt his arms come around her from behind. "How do you feel about that?" "Like my heart might burst," Rosa admitted. "I never thought I'd be called that again. After Lucia died, I thought that part of my life was over." "Grace used to say that love doesn't divide, it multiplies," Calder said softly. "The love you had for Lucia doesn't get split up between our girls. It just grows to include them too." She was a wise woman. She was, and she would have loved seeing how happy her daughters are with you. Rosa turned in his arms, looking up at his face in the lamplight. "We're really doing this, building a life together, all of us." "We really are." Calder cupped her face in his hands. "Mrs. Reyes." Rosa laughed, the sound full of joy and wonder. "Mrs. Reyes, I'm going to have to get used to that." "You have the rest of your life to practice." They stood together in the quiet of their room, holding each other as the ranch settled into sleep around them. Outside, the wind whispered through the grass. The horses nickered softly in the barn. An owl called from the oak tree. Everything was as it should be. Rosa thought about the journey that had brought her here. The betrayal, the desperation, the empty road, the answered prayer. Every painful step had been necessary to bring her to this moment, to this family, to this life she never could have imagined. She had needed shelter, but she'd found so much more. She'd found purpose in the garden she'd restored and the meals she cooked and the clothes she mended. She'd found healing in the girls who'd learned to trust her and the man who'd learned to love again. She'd found strength she didn't know she possessed when she stood up to bullies and ran into storms and fought for the people she loved. Most of all, she'd found home. Not just a place to live, but a place to belong. A place where she was seen, valued, cherished, where her scars were honored and her gifts were appreciated, where she could be fully herself and still be loved. "I love you," Rosa said, the words feeling inadequate for the depth of what she felt.
"I love you too," Calder replied. "Thank you for saying yes, for coming with me that day, for staying."
"Thank you for stopping," Rosa said, "for offering help to a stranger, for seeing me when I felt invisible." "Always," Calder promised. "I'll always see you." They kissed then, long and sweet, sealing the vows they'd made earlier with something deeper and more intimate. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. Outside, the ranch that had nearly been lost to debt and storms and cruelty stood strong and peaceful under the stars. Inside, a family slept, 5 girls dreaming of tomorrows filled with laughter and love, and 2 adults who'd found each other when they'd both needed saving. In the morning, there would be breakfast to make and chores to do and a life to continue building together. There would be challenges ahead, certainly, hard days and difficult moments, but they would face them as a family, united and strong. For now, though, there was just this moment, this perfect, precious moment of peace and completion. Rosa Calderon Reyes closed her eyes and sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the road that had led her here, for the man who'd offered her hope, for the children who'd given her purpose, for the home that had welcomed her when she had nowhere else to go. She had needed shelter, and in giving her that, Calder and his daughters had given her everything. But what they perhaps didn't fully realize yet was that she'd given them something precious in return. She'd given them her fierce loyalty, her tender care, her unwavering commitment. She'd given them someone who would fight for them, protect them, love them with every fiber of her being. She'd given them the gift of her whole heart, broken as it had been, now healing and full. And that, Rosa knew, was worth more than any amount of money or land or material success. Love, real, honest, chosen love, was the foundation on which everything else was built. As sleep finally claimed her, wrapped in Calder's arms in the house that was now truly hers, Rosa's last conscious thought was simple and profound. She was home. Finally, completely, irrevocably home. And she would spend the rest of her days making sure this family, this beautiful patchwork family that had formed from loss and hope and grace, knew exactly how precious they were. The rancher had said, "Come with me," and Rosa had said yes. That single word had changed everything. That single word had saved them all.